Welcome to CGI Voices, where CGI's experts share insights on the latest in federal government management, policy, and technology. I'm your host, Pete Tseronis. Today we're looking to 2030 and beyond. We're going to talk a little technology, we're going to talk people, process, and technology. We're going to talk about how the government's pace of change, for good reason, is a little slower, but most importantly, the needle's constantly moving to the right. Today, we are joined by Stefan Becker, a CGI Senior Vice President and leader of CGI Federal's Regulatory Agency Programs Business Unit.
It's a mouthful, yes.
Say that 3 times. Good to see you, Stefan. And my sister from another mister, Mary Davie, my friend who spent more than 30 years in the government with the General Services Administration and an agency that I love in administration, NASA, and all of its cool R&D and innovation, is now president of Mary Davie Consulting. Good to see you, Mary.
Good to see you.
All right, well, we're going to jump right in. We're going to talk a little bit acquisition, the coolness of acquisition, the innovation around it, and again, why the customer experience, the end user, the voice of the customer, is the objective, and to include them in this transformation, if you will, of government services. So, Stefan, you hear 2030, 6 years from now. Technology trends I was looking up today are kind of the same as if it was the old school Dow Jones. You've got AI, machine learning, IoT, 5G. There's always going to be change in technology, but how do you see the next 6 years in terms of technology influencing government services?
Yeah, thanks, Pete. 6 years seems like it's a lot of time. It's really not. So let's say maybe it's 2030-ish. Maybe a little looking out beyond that. But I think what I directionally see is really gone are the days of static websites, interactions that have fixed forms to fill out, and in come the days of hyper interaction with the government in a mode that is personalized, that is 24/7, that is multi-channel. And I think there's a lot we can do now using some of those technologies to get us there. So it's an exciting time. I think part of the interaction involves sitting at home at night, asking your Alexa app or somebody else what your status is from tax returns to loans. If you have a business, you can interact maybe on one website, pete.gov, where you can see your small business loans, your training that you might be eligible for, and maybe even some proactive suggestions on what schedule to list your business on. So I think that's the kind of world we're moving towards.
I appreciate that. And again, for the audience, the digital-first customer experience is one of the fiscal year 24 focus areas or IT priorities, along with cybersecurity, data as a strategic asset, and of course, IT modernization. But I like that because it calls out transforming federal government customer experience and service delivery to rebuild trust in government. And I think it starts there and it doesn't stop. Mary, your thoughts on Stefan's remarks?
Yeah, I think he's spot on. And, you know, if you think about the way that government has employed technologies over the years, you mentioned that, you know, you hear AI, you hear robotics process automation, we talk about cyber, we talk about quantum. There's always going to be the next thing. But it's how does government put itself in a place where it can leverage, understand, right, leverage, and really start to figure out ways to deploy to continuously improve. So when I think about my time in government, we were always on this journey to explore, but find ways to make it easier for whether it's an individual or a company or another agency in the case of GSA to work with us, to work through us. And that involves, you know, lots of systems, lots of collaboration, but really having the, what I would call maybe the leadership vision and cover in a way to start to find ways to apply these things. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, just have that constant feedback. And we can talk a little bit later about, you know, some of the examples and things that are already happening that make it easier and faster.
Well, 100% the loop. We hear from the good old enterprise architecture days, you architect something, you invest in it, and you implement it, not in the other order, which happens quite often. Buy it, plug it in, and hope it works. But you hit on the open government principles, being transparent, participatory, collaborative, and it's not just government and their integrator or their partner. It's working with industry, being at the table, bringing in folks like you, Stefan, and just helping think about what problems are we trying to solve. And vision is so critical. And Mary, you and I grew up in government. You know, when you're down in the trenches, man, all you want to do is one day I'll be a visionary, but I want to get the stuff done. So I appreciate you mentioning that continuous effort and loop. What I'd like is both of you to lean on some exemplars, some examples, if you will, of process or programs that actually may took a little longer but had a great impact. So, Stefan, let me come back to you because some of your comments would you opened with. There's this government to government conversation. There's a government to industry conversation. Excuse me. And then there's like government to individuals, right? Sometimes we're out there saying to the constituency, this is what we do every day. How do you manage those conversations or put yourself in a position to make sure those customers, the end users of the services Mary talked about, actually feel their voices being heard?
You know, Pete, it's interesting. And Mary, I think maybe you can echo that from your experience in government. Be great to get your perspective. It seems in the last maybe 2 or 3 years, I've seen in conversations with a lot of senior government leaders a real focus in a sense of urgency to have a more transformational experience that they create for anyone doing business with the government, if it's, you know, a citizen, a taxpayer, a business, entities of any sort, nonprofits, academia. But I sense some urgency, and I think the common denominator, as with so many changes we've seen in the past, transformational waves of many different kinds, technology is the enabler to that, but the real driver to make it happen is culture change. It's the people side of things. And so as government agencies stand up roadmaps to improve the experience of those they interact with, roadmaps to integrate AI, those road mapping type exercises are more often now driven from the outside in rather than the agency perspective out. And we've seen a lot of websites that have been redesigned, specifically taking out words that are really driven for compliance, much more integrated words that make it easier for those who want to do business with the government to understand. And so sometimes it's the little things like websites, but it's the technology that is the enabler. The real leadership is still one of culture change, and I've seen a real urgency in the last few years, particularly when it comes to the experience of what it takes to do business with the government.
Yeah, I mean, we have chief customer officers now. We have things that are, have been focused on human-centered design, and sometimes they can start to feel like buzzwords, but you really do see agencies embracing those practices and then putting them into practice. I mean, even with the customer experience executive order, beyond just the initiatives that are outlined and kind of the mandates that agencies have for that, there is a lot of work across agencies that is going on to think about it from the customer journey perspective. And they've got, the qualifying life events that they've been focused on that are really, big deals. You turn a certain age and you get access to different kinds of benefits, or you should be taking different kinds of action. And so I think the government has laid a lot of work, foundational work, within each agency over the years to make things more user-friendly, to make the experience better. But I think now the focus really has been on what has to take place across agencies. And it's more than just collaboration, right? At some point, we're going to have to start sharing data and figure out how to do that. We're going to have to work across different mission areas and different processes, because it really does have to be about the access point from the individual's perspective. And whether that's me as a citizen or me as a company trying to work with the government, the government spends hundreds and hundreds of billions of years, right, in just procurement dollars. But if you're a business trying to figure that out and figure out how to best serve the government, it's really complicated. So what can government do to make that experience more streamlined, more transparent, and really get better solutions, through that process for the government to serve its citizens?
Wonderful. I hope everybody was like taking mental notes. That was like a great keynote opening speech. I loved it, and you got me all fired up. Let me just shout out to the federal government, and Mary, just to riff off you, you mentioned an executive order. Well, there's Executive Orders 14058, which I believe is the most current one. It speaks to delivering a digital-first public experience, or that's Memorandum 23-22, forgive me, but Executive Order 14058, transforming federal customer experience and service delivery to rebuild trust in government. That is one of several. And for our audience, there's Executive Order 13985, 13707, 13571, 12862. This customer experience thing isn't new. And I love that you, Stefan, brought up, we all were there when the internet was born. And then all of a sudden the world changed. And then we had COVID, and technology as an enabler clearly is an accelerant to change the way businesses do their jobs, the workers do their jobs. And make no mistake, the federal government, 436 agencies strong, according to the Federal Register today, has a unique mission in putting those services in the hands of those who need them, Mary. I appreciate those comments. So let's talk about, Stefan, some examples of that. I know the Federal Acquisition Service Catalog Platform, also known as FCP, was a pretty big deal, and it's being, the benefits are being realized by customers. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, there are many different ways where you can go and figure out how to interact with the federal government. The Federal Catalog Platform is a way for companies to list their services that they offer and make it accessible to government agencies. GSA has revamped that website and the platform and the infrastructure, and has really cut down some of the digital red tape, if you want, that was involved in getting a business registered and listed in the catalog. And so I think those are excellent examples for that cross-agency, right, because this is a cross-government initiative, a need to be stretching the organizational boundaries of the current agency structure and really looking across to solve something that is a particular process or a particular mission problem of how to interact with the government. So that catalog is a great example.
Can I just add on to that?
Absolutely, Mary.
So that is part of GSA's federal marketplace strategy. It's one huge component. And a lot of the systems in GSA that supported the multiple award schedules, for instance, have been around for a long time. So GSA, recognizing that several years ago, took several actions. One is to consolidate the GSA schedules. If you, again, were a business and you had IT services, you needed one schedule. If you had professional services, you needed another schedule. There's schedules for products. And so I think there are like 19,000 companies on the GSA schedules. And then for agencies to try to find and buy and figure out which schedule should I use, what companies are on which schedule, and what special item numbers, right, for the specific kind of offering was tough. And GSA recognized that. So the mass consolidation has been a huge success. The catalog piece of that is really critical because of the millions and millions of products that are available through GSA. So now the companies have an easier way, much faster way, to get their products online, to keep that catalog up to date. And the really neat thing about it is the GSA contracting officers were in a bunch of different systems trying to manage all of that and didn't see the same data that the companies did when they were putting their information. And so if a company had a problem, they'd call the GSA contracting officer, couldn't see what they were talking about. So now they have one system, it's modernized, they got rid of a legacy system. And now working on things like the mainframe that GSA has had for FSS 19 to manage all of this, right? Modernizing that and really starting to cull the data out, integrating into other systems to reduce, the rework, the duplication. So it's part of a broader kind of program, again, to make it easier to find and buy, to reduce the cost, reduce the complexity, and allow agencies to have a better buying experience as well.
I want to say that as a former Fed myself, a CTO, a guy who always wanted to see the latest and greatest tool or take advantage of, there was always the acquisition side, that it wasn't as simple as, let's go get that. There was costing and there was qualifications, technical proposals and all that good stuff. I was always intrigued by the art of the possible of technology. And hearing you speak, Mary, obviously I knew that challenging role of GSA, federal acquisitions, to make sure that things were streamlined and easy, than they may have been in the past. And I just want to summarize what this FCP, FAS catalog platform, central hub to review all catalog actions and status, access to catalog history, shared user interfaces, automated data validation checks. That's that continuous process of our dependence on data. And the government is about seeking and solving, not buying and selling, right? What problems can I solve as an industry partner? And the government's saying, here are the problems and here's how we want you to come and help us solve them. So I hope the folks understand that as much as the tech is the cool side of government in many ways as an enabler, having a strategy and approach to make the buying and the problem solving streamlined is so critical. So thank you, Mary. Mary, let's stick with you for a minute. You mentioned the word data. You worked at NASA after your wonderful career at GSA, and you got to experience that research and development side, the true innovation. Where are we going? Working at Energy, I enjoyed that environment as well. Can you talk a little bit about that experience and how that culture, even the change of acquiring products for things that we may not experience in our lifetime, if you will, complemented your time at GSA?
Yeah, it was really fun going to an agency like NASA, where I have a long family history, so it was neat to get there. But to see it from a mission side and a mission perspective. And, NASA's true mission, they want to inspire the world. And so what they're really doing is looking at how to make life better on this planet through exploration, right, in space. And so the huge and heavy science focus, the research and development, like you talked about, the engineering side of things, it was an incredible learning experience that I was, humbled to be part of. And of NASA's now, I think, $26 billion budget or so, probably 80 to 85% of that happens through procurement, grants, partnership agreements, and things like that. So they have many different models in which to collaborate with other countries, academic institutions, obviously the commercial sector and the private sector, and just the things that have evolved over time and really in very recently are the capabilities that are out there on the commercial side that are now starting, they're launching people to the space station and the private astronaut missions. That we didn't do that just a few years ago. Landing things and flying helicopters on Mars, doing a lot of the heavy rocket testing, right, with the new rockets that are out there. That's all happening in the private sector. So there's a lot of public-private partnerships, and NASA is really starting to kind of think about its own journey and where it's going to be in the future, what role it will play, what its capabilities and workforce needs to look like, and what should it be relying on from the private sector and how to make those partnerships work.
So thank you. And Stefan, I know you're itching to say, I'm interested as a seasoned, not just you personally, but this company, CGI, you hear about this type of mission, which is different than mission at other agency, but technology underpinning. What's your take on this, that the government is not always risk averse? We have to cure cancer. We have to clean our water. We have to make the grid safer and more secure. Talk a little bit about how you come in as an individual in your team to help those at Mary in her former life, achieve that objective sooner rather than later.
Yeah, it's great. And Mary, you did such a great job to articulate the mission of NASA that is very hard to compete with for anybody else in government and on the commercial side. But what a great example to highlight the commercial government collaboration, and it's really all about the mission. And there are a lot of great examples we can take from commercial experience in banking, in telecommunications, in health, in manufacturing, apply them to the government, but really, Pete, everything is about helping the government execute their mission in a way that then enables faster, more seamless interactions in that process. I think I mentioned to you in the past, I'm a little bit of a data junkie. I think today it'd be called a fancy name like a data scientist. When I first started, it was called a statistician, which gave me an opportunity to crunch a lot of numbers. And in the end, over time, I started with a lot of banks who had the same initial challenge where we started the conversation. They had a a mortgage banking organization, they had a private banking organization, they had a commercial banking part, and so getting data that spanned that view was really difficult. And the collaboration of breaking those silos down, I think, is similar to what we're seeing and has evolved in looking across a lot of the federal agencies. It's really about the interaction, about the business processes, and not so much anymore about the status quo of a certain organizational structure. And I think there are a lot of commercial examples that are really relevant in that process. And so I'm encouraged and look forward to contributing a lot more of those commercial best practices into this process. But really, in the end, it's all about the mission.
Yeah.
Go
NASA
ahead,
was
Mary.
just, always seeking commercial input in different ways. And recognizing, for instance, around data, there is so much of it now, and there's going to continue to be more. The growth there is something that they're really thinking through. How do we best collaborate with these partners, outside of our firewalls, and to share data so that we have better science and better information and can better, support the life on this planet. And so really forward thinking about using technology in ways that we had not before to share that information and to have people collaborate, across different walls, if you will. And those are the kinds of things that's exciting to see the continued push for, and just the passion around that. People, are hungry for more information, more innovation, thinking about, how do I do something different, and how do I really get, to a better mission outcome in that sense.
So, Mary, let me riff off that, because I think that for those who like to compare, well, the commercial industry can buy quicker, implement faster, and they get results quicker. Well, the government and industry it's two different orbits. That we have things in place and regulation in the government to buy technology and services for reasons, and we can learn, Stefan, from those experiences. But Mary, are you seeing, even now that you're out, kind of like me on the other side, that effort to break down silos or cylinders of excellence, as I've learned to call them, what's changing? Are you seeing a shift there? Because we talked at the outset, government and industry have to be at the table together to solve the mission problem and not forget about the customer. Are you seeing some change, or when you were still in government, you kind of made it happen? Because it starts with people saying, let's sit down and figure this out together. I'm not looking for a point solution.
Yeah. Yes, when I was there, we were, and maybe it was, part of its GSA is a business kind of entity, if you will, very incentivized to find new ways to do things. And we were given leadership cover, that I mentioned in the beginning, to explore things, maybe take some risks in certain areas. And there was a lot of excitement about that, and when GSA comes out with something new that really does benefit, another agency or a company that they're working with, that's exciting to people internally. And so there was a lot of incentive to, work with industry, to be transparent, to ask for information in a bunch of different forums and formats. And I think that, that is going to continue, but also it's the way in which that they're kind of phrasing the prompt, if you will. What is it we're trying to achieve? And what are the different ways to get there? Because you do want these hyper-personalized experiences, whether you're GSA working with another agency or GSA working, with a company. How can you make it easier for somebody, to get on contract? But it's more than that. It's that hyper-personalized experience about, well, I'm a small business, so what are the opportunities for me? Mm-hmm. How would I know? How would the government know that I exist? What are things that they can do to be, I think, more push-focused rather than more, kind of pulling and manual focused. So there, again, a lot of good work has been done, and I think that it has served us well, but I think that the government really needs to kind of speed things up and think about it a little bit differently, especially with the technology that is becoming available.
I think there is, as you said, Mary, there's so many examples that are an attempt to get us closer. And I know we're talking about 2030, maybe 2035, directionally longer, but there's a lot going on right now. We are in February. OMB this month published the federal program inventory, right? One place where you can go and search detailed information about all various government programs in one one place. So I think there are a lot of things that are underway in the experience side. There are a lot of things that are moving in securing, protecting, predicting the data and making it trusted and shareable. I think that we see a lot of movements of sharing data in cloud infrastructures for specific purposes across agencies. And then at the infrastructure layer with some of the early pilot programs, if you want, around 5G and quantum computing and other things that are really, I think, making some progress. So there's a lot that is getting us on our path to get there.
Well, I mean, we're gonna pivot here into parting shots because the time is flying. But I tell you, I'm all fired up now to talk a bit more about getting into some of those technologies. I will say this though, Mary, I think about the fiscal year 24 IT priorities, digital first customer experience. I think you coined one for 25, the hyper-personalized experience, which brings the people aspect into it. And I know, Stefan, you've been hitting on that too. It's not buying, selling, it's seeking and solving. So, hey, let's do this. I'd like to close out with, we talked a lot about organizational change and technology as an enabler, and acquisition is equally as important as those technology solutions. And there's just a diverse mission in the federal government, from NASA to DOE to labor and on and on and on. And hey, shout out to our high-impact service providers for our audience. Please look at that on performance.gov. There are some amazing customer experience-focused initiatives that you will find a lot of interest in, and as well seeing the results. And a lot of what Mary and Stefan were talking about today, it takes people, process, and technology. So check out the high-impact service providers. But let's close it out. Stefan, what do you want to leave with the audience from today's conversation? Is something they should go home, noodle over, and maybe research a bit more?
So some parting shots. We are well on our way for this transformation to happen that gets us closer to the hyper-personalization in how we interact, businesses, individuals interact with the government. And I think a few things need to happen. Ongoing integration of commercial practices and public-private partnerships. I think we'll see a lot of that get us even closer. And I think we need to remember to do it one piece, one business, one experience, one business process at a time.
Wonderful. Mary?
Yeah, you talked about the diversity in missions across government, and yes, that's true, and they're there for a reason, right, and a purpose. But some fundamental things have to change in order for us to really, I believe, get to these hyper-personalized experiences. And that may revolve around, how agencies are funded, how agencies are structured to work, and it has to be more than an OMB memo that comes out to say, agency A, B, and C will work together to try to do this thing. We make good progress there. But, to be a game changer, it has to be from the perspective of the person sitting in the seat, right, who is a citizen that may need help after a disaster or may need some sort of, guidance for a life event. What does that really take, right, to pull that off? And I think that's the way that we need to start thinking about things if it's going to actually, significantly change.
Well, thank you. And just hearing that, my parting shot is going to be there's meeting the mail and compliance, and then there's those stretch goals and making a difference and moving that needle to the right. Both what you have both done for your careers, both in government and in industry. And I appreciated this conversation. Thank you for bringing it today and just sharing a lot of the wisdom.
Thank you.
Thank you. Really enjoyed it.
You can find CGI Voices on your preferred podcast platform or watch the video version on YouTube. Subscribe or follow, and spread the word to your colleagues. CGI Voices, expert insights for federal decision makers.